Hello, welcome to the second of our video series on understanding automatic enrolment. My name is Nick Clough, one of the client relationship managers at Hargreaves Lansdown Workplace Solutions. In this instalment, we're going to take a closer look at the postponement process. So let's jump straight into that. Now you might remember from the first of our videos, which was taking a closer look at the assessment of a worker, that assessment takes place at various different times. Now what postponement is doing is actually just delaying when that original assessment takes place. So as a reminder, that could be on a duty start date for a newly formed entity which is taking on workers for the first time. It could also be on a worker's first day if you just employ somebody new into your business. Or perhaps it's on the first day that a worker would otherwise become an eligible job holder. Now, if that's not a term that sounds familiar to you, please do just recap yourself using our previous video, just in the relevant section there. But ultimately what we're saying here is that this is somebody who meets the eligibility criteria for the first time, perhaps because they've only just earned enough to be classed as such, or perhaps because they've just had their 22nd birthday. Now, assessment can be postponed for up to 3 months from any of these dates above. So they would normally be known as the AE date in their own right, the auto-enrolment date. However, if you are choosing to use postponement, what you're essentially doing is buying yourself time, pushing out your duties into a specified future date. There are several reasons why that might be useful for you to do, and we'll look at those in more detail shortly. But fundamentally here, that is what the postponement is all about. Now, a term to be familiar with at this stage is something called the deferral date. So we've already mentioned the AE date, or the automatic enrolment date. If you use postponement, the deferral date is just the future date that becomes. So for example, if you postpone for 1 month, then the AE date is the original one when you would have assessed and enrolled from. If you postpone for 1 month, the deferral date is the new date you've elected at the end of that postponement period. Now, really importantly, to use postponement, you must issue the employee who is being postponed with a postponement notice. And you have a 6-week and 1 day deadline to do that from the date on which postponement is being used from. So let's take an example just to explain that in more detail. So let's assume then that your company takes on an employee on the 11th of January this year. So that's their start date, and it would normally be their AE date as well. You'd assess them immediately, and then they'd be eligible straight away, assuming that they met the conditions. However, let's assume then that you want to postpone this worker for any number of reasons. You've got those 6 weeks and 1 day deadline to be aware of there. So the 23rd of February 2021 would be the deadline by which the worker has to have been given their postponement notice. Now this is a statutory document. It's very, very prescriptive. Simply telling the worker that they will be postponed verbally or in writing is not enough. You have to hit certain statutory definitions. HL can help you with this. We can draft the communication for you if it's not something that you are comfortable doing yourself, or the pension regulator do have templates available on their website. Now I mentioned in our previous video that it is actually HL's view that the assessment and wherever possible the enrolment process as a whole is best outsourced to your payroll provider, who might be in a better position to carry out that assessment and perhaps even issue these communications for you as well. So it might be something worth exploring to see whether or not you can get your payroll provider to actually take on the responsibility of sending these notices on your behalf. That is great from your perspective if you can take the weight off your shoulders in that respect. But as with all your auto-enrollment duties, please do just bear in mind that ultimately it's your responsibility as the employer to make sure that the information is being given on time and that it meets all of the requirements that the legislation lays out. So carrying on then with our example, so somebody started here on the 11th of January, you've got to tell them you're postponing them by the 23rd of February, 6 weeks and 1 day later. And then as we know, you can postpone for up to 3 months. So the last day it would be possible to push out the postponement to would be the 11th of April 2021. Now, that's the date then at which you need to actually assess the worker. So you'd have a look at them on the 11th of April as opposed to the 11th of January or any nominated date in between. You'd consider whether or not they meet the eligible job holder definition or one of the alternative ones. And again, see the alternative video if that's not ringing bells for you. And then you would act accordingly. And again, that process is laid out in the other videos in this series. So why might you use postponement? Well, there's several reasons why it's really popular for employers. I'd probably say anecdotally that the majority of our clients do use postponement, especially if they are following the statutory enrolment process. So some of these key benefits are, firstly, if you do take on seasonal workers, let's say that you are a retail business and you take on temporary staff to cover the Christmas rush, for example. If you're just taking people on just for a couple of months, maybe November and December, say, postponing them would actually mean that you don't need to go to all the trouble of enrolling them into the pension scheme just for 1 or maybe 2 months worth of contributions. So it allows for seasonal changes to the workforce. It also helps from an administrative point of view, from your perspective, just by buying you a little bit more time just to carry out that assessment and send all of the statutory information to the worker. I'm sure you'll all be familiar with the amount of work that goes into onboarding a new starter, and sometimes just pushing out one of these responsibilities for an extra couple of weeks or months will just help you just in those initial few weeks. Now this one is not particularly sexy, but it's really important from our perspective. Postponement allows you to align the assessment of the worker to the first day of a pay reference period. So it's quite wordy, unfortunately, but really what we're saying here is that rather than somebody starting midway through a month, you carrying out the assessment on what would not be a true reflection of their normal earnings, if you postpone them to the first of the next month or the first of the next pay reference period, or maybe the second or even the third, as long as you have time to do that, then that just means that you will be assessing them based on their true earnings. And linked to that is the fourth benefit, which is that it avoids the need for you to pro rata contributions. Now let's assume then that somebody starts midway through a month and you postpone for 1 full month. Now what you've done there is, yes, you've bought yourself some time, which is great. However, you've still got the same issue that you'd have if you put them in immediately. You're going to be assessing their wages in that entire month, which is great. That's helpful. It helps you see if they are actually eligible normally or not. But if they are, you now need to prorate those contributions. You can't pay contributions on an entire month's salary if you've told somebody they're only eligible from, say, the middle of the month onwards. And not all payroll software is actually able to prorate those contributions in that way. So aligning it to a pay reference period means that you can just take the fixed percentage of whatever earnings they have in that particular period. So that's a really useful benefit of postponement. And last but not least is the obvious one, I suppose. It's the cost implication. If you can push postponement out for 2 or 3 months, that obviously over time is going to build up into quite a significant saving for you as a business, just because you'll save on the cost of pension contributions, or at least most likely you will, which will hopefully make more sense in a moment. So, are there any drawbacks of postponement? Well, unfortunately, yes, there is. So, as we've already mentioned, this is the counter argument to our time and breathing space benefit. Now, as you've seen already here, there is a statutory requirement of you to send a postponement notice. So it is something that you are going to need to build into the process and remember to do. If that notice is not sent, the postponement has failed and it cannot be used. So really important to remember to send that postponement notice. I guess as well, other benefits might start immediately, just looking more holistically at the benefits that you offer to your employees. So creating a level of disparity here between the pension benefit and maybe other benefits that you offer might not be something that's too appealing to you. But that's really your call as to whether or not that would be an issue or not in your organization. The third one, which is probably the biggest drawback, potentially at least, is that workers may be able to opt in. So if somebody is a non-eligible job holder, or if somebody is an eligible job holder, then they can, of course, say to you, I actually want to opt in ahead of postponement. You then carry out that assessment at the start of the next pay reference period, and unfortunately, if they are eligible, you will have to put them into the pension scheme. So there's no guarantee that just by using postponement as part of your process, that you will see these benefits. Okay, so if it's more of a cost-saving exercise that is the main driver for you, just be aware there that you might find that actually in some cases you do need to start paying those contributions slightly earlier than you may well have otherwise planned. Now, although postponement is a really useful tool, and as I've already said, it's very, very popular amongst employers that we deal with, there is the potential here that of quite a common error occurring relating to postponement, and that is the risk there that contributions are over deducted. So we've already discussed this when talking there about the benefits and the fact that you can pro-rata those contributions. And I just thought it'd be useful just to go through a quick example of that. So let's stick with our previous example of the worker who joined on the 11th of January, and they're going to be postponed, let's say, for 3 full months, or at least that's the intention initially. So right out as far as possible to the 11th of April. So here we go. We've got in this particular example, the pay reference period is calendar month aligned, so it runs from the 1st of April all the way through to the 30th of April, and we've got the worker starting there on the 11th, broadly in the middle. Now then, the earnings are going to be assessed are all the earnings that this employee has in the pay reference period. So we know that this person started on the 11th of January, and therefore they've got a full calendar month's pay reference period of earnings that we can look at to deem whether or not they are eligible for the pension. However, because we've nominated the 11th as the deferral date, then only earnings from the 11th to the 30th of this particular month are classed as pensionable. In other words, anything that this person has earned, which was accrued between the 1st and the 10th of the month, cannot be taken for pension contributions. There is no statutory entitlement there for you to deduct pension contributions, or perhaps even reduce somebody's salary in the case of salary sacrifice, before you've actually created that agreement with them. Now you can see there that potentially is going to cause you a few issues. This would stray more outside of a pensions issue as such, and it really does become more of an employment law issue if you've been deducting contributions without creating that right. So if this is something that you fear that you may have done, really all we can do is just refer you onto an employment lawyer just for more specialist advice as to how best to rectify that. The good news is though, going forwards, postponement can simplify things for you. So let's again consider the same example. So we've got here the 1st of April, the first day of that pay reference period. 30th of April is the end because it's a calendar month pay reference. And if we defer this employee to the 1st of April as opposed to the 11th, so we're just ever so slightly trimming it down to 2 months and then a number of days. Then if we decide that they are an eligible job holder, so they meet the conditions to go into the scheme automatically, well this time there's no need to be prorating those contributions for partway through a month because everything they've earned is included. It's all pensionable earnings in that month. So we describe this as postponing to the start of the 3rd full pay reference period. In other words, you could also say that it's postponing to the 4th month, which is, the same thing, just different ways of saying it. So please do remember there that although you can postpone for 3 full calendar months, it's often more beneficial if you just postpone for 2 months and a number of days, and that postponement period will vary employee to employee, depending on when they started in their first month. It could be very, very close to 3 months, or it could be 2 months and literally a day or two if they join at the end of a month. But generally speaking, that's our guidance to our clients, just to simplify things and reduce the potential for error. Now, as always with these things, there's plenty of sources for you to go to for further help and further reading. The Pension Regulator's Employer Hub online is just a section of their website dedicated for employers to get information on their duties. So it's a really useful resource for you to bookmark. Equally, the Pension Regulator's detailed guidance is where all of these rules are recorded and set down. So if you do need anything more specialist, that is a good place to go. It's pretty heavy going, as previously noted. So by all means, before you go there, feel free to speak to your advisor, or of course, come to HL, either through your normal client relationship manager. We're always on hand and very, very happy to help you, or just email assist@hl.co.uk, and we're constantly monitoring that, and a member of the team will pick it up and come back to you as soon as we can. Thank you very much for watching.